Dante Salvator was already in a killing mood, the night his mother came home talking about bread. His offer was simple. 6 weeks under his protection, her brother's debt erased, her bakery left standing. 42 days, one rule, total obedience. What he wanted was her safety where he could see it. What he promised was that no one would ever touch her again. Her rules were simpler: keep her head down, save her brother, leave with her heart intact. But Dante hadn't planned on the detail that mattered most. Not the bread, not the debt. The way she broke her last loaf in half and turned the soft middle toward a stranger without asking for a name, a story, or even a thank you. In his world, kindness was always a performance. A transaction, a weapon sharpened under silk. She made it look like breathing. And before those 6 weeks were over, his mother would call her a blessing, his enemies would call her leverage, and Dante would call her the one thing he had never survived before: his ruin. The first time I heard a room full of armed men go silent for Dante Salvator, I was standing in an alley with one loaf of bread under my arm and a paper bag of blood oranges bumping my knee. It was February, the kind of New York cold that got under your clothes and stayed there. My fingers were flour dry and burning. I had closed the bakery an hour ago, counted coins twice, lied to my brother once, and told myself the same thing I told myself every night after our father died. Tomorrow would be better if I made it to tomorrow first. The alley behind the old fish market should have been empty. Instead, the steel door at the far end stood open just enough to leak yellow light over wet pavement. Men in dark coats moved in and out of it with the particular stillness of dangerous people. Not restless, not loud, just ready. Italian drifted out in low, sharp pieces, then it stopped all at once. I should have kept walking. I would have, if I hadn't seen the woman sitting against the brick wall near the dumpster. She wore a gray coat too thin for the weather and a black scarf over her hair. Her hands were bare. Not gloved bare. They were the kind of hands you noticed if you grew up around work. Small cuts across the knuckles, flour or dust packed white into the skin. The blunt dignity of somebody who had spent a lifetime doing things that needed doing. Her eyes lifted to mine, not pleading, not ashamed, just tired enough to make my chest hurt. "Are you all right?" I asked. She gave a small shrug. "I've been better." Her voice was rough with cold. I looked down at the loaf tucked under my arm. It was all I had taken home from the bakery that night. One round country loaf with a dark crust because the oven had run hot at closing. I had meant to split it with Nico and pretend soup was enough. Instead, I crouched in front of a stranger. "Here," I said. I tore the loaf open with both hands. The sound of the crust cracking in the cold made something in the alley seem to listen. Inside, the crumb was still pale and soft, warm at the center. I turned that softer half toward her without thinking. I kept the burnt heel for myself. Then I put 2 oranges in her lap. She looked at the bread, then at me. "You don't know me," she said. "I know hungry." That was true enough. "You'll have nothing left." I tried to smile. "I work at a bakery. If I'm lucky, I can steal my own dignity back tomorrow." To my surprise, she laughed, low. Real? I was still crouched there when the black sedan slid into the mouth of the alley. 3 men got out first. The 4th stepped from the back seat like the cold had been waiting for him. Tall. Black wool coat. Dark hair brushed back from a face that looked carved out of patience and bad intent. He had no visible hurry anywhere in him. The kind of man who did not need to raise his voice because the world corrected itself when he entered it. I knew who he was before anyone said his name, not because I had ever met Dante Salvator. Because men like that only existed in whispers, in stories bakers told with the back door locked, in the sudden silence of shopkeepers who wanted no trouble and paid for peace anyway. One of the men moved toward the woman. "Signora," Dante's gaze cut to him. That was enough. The man stopped. "Signora." My stomach dropped. The woman looked almost amused. Dante looked at the loaf in her hands first, then the burnt heel in mine. His eyes settled on me with a steadiness that felt like a hand at the back of my neck. "What is your name?" he asked. I should have lied. Sofia Bellini. Recognition flickered in one of the men behind him. Debt recognition, neighborhood recognition, trouble recognition. My heart started beating harder. Dante's eyes did not leave my face. Bellini Bakery on Mott. It wasn't a question. Yes. His mother, because she had to be his mother, rose slowly, still holding my bread. She fed me, Dante. I almost laughed, because the understatement of it was absurd. As if this was normal. As if mafia mothers regularly sat in freezing alleys waiting to see what the city would do. Dante stepped closer, not enough to touch, enough to make the space around me smaller. He glanced at the burnt heel still in my hand. No one had ever looked at a piece of bread like that, not hunger. Not greed, something older and more damaged. Then footsteps slapped at the far end of the alley. Bruno Peretti came around the corner out of breath and mean as ever, his cheap leather jacket open, his mouth already set for ugliness. He had been trying to collect my younger brother's gambling debt for 3 weeks. "There you are," he snapped. "You think you can dodge me because your daddy's dead?" I went cold. He saw the cars. The men, Dante. All the blood left his face so fast it was almost funny. Almost. Dante didn't even turn fully toward him. "You collect from women in alleys now, Bruno." Bruno swallowed. "It's family business." "No," Dante said. "It was." The quiet of it was worse than a threat. Bruno started speaking too fast. "The boy owes. He doesn't owe you anything anymore." Bruno looked at me like I had done this on purpose. I hated that look. Men had been giving it to women since the beginning of time. As if danger followed us because we had invited it. Dante's mother tucked the bread closer to her coat. "Take me home," she said to no one in particular. Then to me, "Thank you, Sofia Bellini." I didn't know how to answer that. Dante did. He looked at the man on his left, find out everything. Then his eyes came back to mine, unreadable and dark. "About the bakery," he said. "About the brother. About the little saint who gives away the soft half." My breath caught. Little saint. He made it sound nothing like kindness. By the time I reached our apartment over the bakery, the locks had been changed downstairs, and the deed to Bruno Peretti's debt was waiting on my counter. My name was written across the envelope in Dante Salvator's hand. One door had already closed. I did not sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with the envelope in front of me and listened to the building make its old, tired noises around me. The radiator hissed. Pipes knocked once in the wall. Somewhere below, the bakery cooled itself in little settling cracks. Across from me, Nico kept pretending he wasn't watching my face. Finally, at 4 in the morning, he said, "You met Dante Salvator." I looked up. My brother was 19. Reckless in all the ways our father had begged him not to be, with our mother's mouth and the kind of remorse that arrived late and all at once. He had tried to shave the panic out of himself, and only succeeded in making his jaw look younger. "You say that," I said, "like I won a prize." "You kind of did." I let out a sound that wasn't a laugh. "The prize being organized crime. The prize being Bruno Peretti not breaking my fingers. That happened because you borrowed money from a man whose suit looked like a funeral." He winced. "I know." I hated when he said that softly. It always worked on me. I opened the envelope. Inside was 1 page, thick cream paper, no threats, no signature flourish, just a short note. "Your brother's debt is settled. You and your brother will come to the Salvator estate at noon. Until I say otherwise, you do not leave unguarded." DS Nico read it upside down and went pale. Noon, as if I had another appointment. He could be helping. He could also be collecting. Nico rubbed a hand over his mouth. "You think he wants something?" In his world, I folded the paper again, everything wants something. At 11:30, a black car stopped outside the bakery. The man who got out of the front seat was built like a refrigerator in an expensive coat. Thick neck, beautiful profile. Sorrow in his eyes so dramatic it would have been ridiculous if he hadn't looked genuinely aggrieved. He came in, inhaled once and put a hand over his heart. "Dear God," he said, "fresh bread." I stared. He pointed at himself. "Tommaso Ricci, everyone calls me Maso. I work for Mr. Salvetter. I was told to escort you. I would like the record to show I am doing this under dietary protest." Nico blinked. Dietary protest? Maso looked personally betrayed by the display case. "Dr. Giulia has me on no carbs, no sugar, no joy. She says if I continue eating like a grieving widower at a church buffet, my arteries will become folklore." Despite myself, I almost smiled. He noticed and brightened instantly. "There she is, the miracle girl. You fed the boss's mother and now all of us are living in a ballad." I went still. "His mother?" Maso's expression shifted. "Ah, you shouldn't have said that. He'll kill me less for saying too much than Dr. Giulia will for stress eating if I say too little." So the woman in the alley had been Livia Salvator. Something about that made the whole night tilt. Nico said, "Sophia, I'm thinking." Maso leaned toward the croissants like a man in mourning. "Please think in the car. If I stay here another minute, I'll commit a felony against pastry." The estate was north of the city. All wrought iron gates and stone walls and winter-bare trees. It should have looked vulgar. Instead, it looked old enough to have opinions. When the gates opened, I felt my old life narrow behind me. Men moved quietly everywhere, not patrolling in circles, positioned, watching. The house itself was pale limestone and dark windows, the kind of place where even the silence had been expensive. Dante was waiting in a room with a black marble fireplace and a table long enough to seat regret. He didn't stand when I entered. He simply looked at me, and somehow that felt more deliberate. Nico hovered half a step behind me. Maso remained by the door with the solemn expression of a man enduring scent-based temptation. Dante said, "Your brother will stay in the East Wing." Nico made a choked sound. "I'm sorry, what?" "You," Dante said to me, "will stay where my mother can reach you." I folded my arms. That sounds less like gratitude and more like house arrest. Something moved in his face. Not amusement. Recognition, maybe, that I wasn't going to make this easy. "Bruno Peretti was not acting alone," he said. "Someone is buying neighborhood debt, bakeries, butcher shops, delivery routes. Your family name came up because your brother is careless." Nico lowered his head. Dante continued, "Until I know why you stay here. I have a business. I know. It has security now. I didn't ask for your help." "No," he said. "You fed my mother instead." The room went still around that. He stood then, slow and controlled, and came around the table. Every instinct I had told me to step back. I didn't. That seemed to interest him more than it should have. Up close, he smelled like cold air and dark cedar, like he had come in from somewhere the night still clung to. There was a scar at the base of his throat, mostly hidden by his collar. His hands were bare, beautiful hands which felt like an insulting detail to notice. "I don't require thanks," he said. "That's convenient. What I require is compliance." My chin lifted before I could stop it. "I'm not one of your men." "No," he said quietly. "You're the reason my mother walked into my house eating your bread." For one suspended second, I thought he might touch my face. He didn't. That was somehow worse. Behind me, Maso muttered under his breath, "And I'm the reason no one in this family gets to eat focaccia ever again." Nico made a startled noise that might have been a laugh. Dante's gaze flicked toward him. "Your brother's room is upstairs. He does not leave the grounds. You do not leave the house without escort. If a number you don't know calls, you don't answer it. If a window opens at night, you close it and call security." "You say these things," I said, "like I'm already yours to order." His eyes held mine. When he spoke, the words landed softly enough to bruise. "I say them," he said, "like I intend to keep you alive." That should not have done anything to me. It did. He stepped back first. Of course he did. He was a man who knew exactly where a moment ended and chose the end himself. Maso clapped his hands once, miserable and bright. Wonderful. We've arrived at the kidnapping with manners phase. If anyone needs me, I'll be in the courtyard trying not to smell the kitchen. Dante didn't look at him. Take them. As Maso led us out, Dante said my nickname again. Not to me, to the silence after me. Watch the little saint. By nightfall, I knew two things. The gates locked from the outside. And he never repeated himself. I lasted 6 hours before I found the kitchen. People imagine mafia houses wrong. They picture chandeliers and silk and women draped over things. The Salvatore estate had chandeliers, yes. It also had security monitors tucked behind carved wood, men with guns pretending to be part of the architecture, and the strange thick quiet of a place where everyone knew exactly who could end them. I woke before dawn because I always did. I walked past 3 closed doors, down one service staircase, and followed the smell of yeast and coffee to the lowest level of the house. The kitchen was larger than the bakery downstairs from my apartment and twice as clean. Copper pans hung in military order. There were 2 ovens that probably cost more than our entire shop. For a full minute I just stood there. Then I tied on an apron hanging by the pantry and started making dough. It was the only thing in the world that always answered honestly. Flour, water, salt. Yeast, heat, hands. No lies survived kneading. By the time the first staff member came in, I had 3 doughs proofing and an orange peel syrup reducing on the stove. He stared at me, at the flour on my cheek, at the tray of braided rolls I had shaped without permission, and wisely decided not to interfere. That was how Livia Salvatore found me. She stood in the doorway in a cream robe with silver hair brushed smooth from her face, looking nothing like the woman in the alley except in the eyes. I straightened. You, she tilted her head. Did you think I was a hallucination brought on by hunger? I thought you were poorer. Yesterday, yes, today less so. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Her mouth softened. There you are. There you are, as if she had been expecting something from me. I didn't know what to do with that. I shouldn't have taken your bread, she said. You were hungry. So were you. I looked down at the dough. I've been worse. Livia moved closer and put a hand over the rising bowl. My husband used to say you learned everything important about a person by watching how they handle bread. Did he? He was often wrong, but not about that. She said it lightly. There was a grave under the sentence anyway. By 7, the kitchen smelled like orange peel, dark crust, black coffee, and butter warming in pans. I shaped one last loaf the way my father had taught me when we had very little and wanted it to look like more. A tight, burnished crown with seeds pressed into the top, hard outside. Tender at the center. Livia watched me score it. What is that? Poor man's crown, I said. Hard shell, soft middle, looks proud even when it is. Ah, her eyes flicked to my face. A family recipe. My father made it when he wanted the room to feel less scared. She nodded once, like she understood more than I had said. By 8, men had begun moving through the hall outside. Phones, low voices, leather holsters beneath tailored jackets. One woman entered without apology and looked me over like a report. She was in her 30s, dark-haired, angular, beautiful in the severe way knives are beautiful. Her black suit fit too well to be decorative. There was a small pale scar near her jaw. Vittoria Sera, she said, I run intelligence for Dante. That sentence should not have sounded like a warning. It did. Sofia Bellini. I know. Of course she did. Her gaze went to my hands pressing air from the dough. You should understand something. Men speak softly in this house because they don't need to raise their voices. If Mr. Salvatore tells you to avoid a room, avoid it. If he says stay inside, stay inside. Politeness here is not safety. It is efficiency. I'm starting to notice. Her expression changed by half a degree. Approval perhaps. Good. Then another voice came from the hall, male, warm, familiar in that dangerous family way people become familiar when they've already learned everything about you. Vittoria, if you frighten the guest before coffee, Livia will poison all of us. A man in his 50s stepped in, silver at the temples, elegant in a navy suit. His smile was so easy I distrusted it instantly. Luca Vanetti, he said, consigliere, translator of bad moods. Occasional cleaner of legal disasters. He kissed Livia's cheek, nodded at me, and stole a piece of orange peel from the cutting board. Livia slapped his hand lightly. Animal, starving animal, Luca corrected, that word again, starving. It moved strangely through this house. I was plating the first rolls when Dante came in. He stopped just over the threshold. It wasn't dramatic. No one announced him. The room simply shifted, bodies adjusted, voices cut. His gaze landed on the bread, then on me. There was flour at my wrist, a curl of hair escaping my braid, and heat rising off the oven at my back. I should have felt foolish. Instead, I felt watched so directly that my skin forgot how to be ordinary. You found the kitchen, he said. I was under the impression kidnapping victims weren't forbidden from breakfast. Luca laughed once under his breath. Vittoria did not. Dante came closer, not too close, never careless. He tore one of the dark rolls open. The crust cracked. Something in his face went still in a way that had nothing to do with control and everything to do with memory. He looked at the soft center in his hand too long. I pretended not to notice. That also felt noticed. It's called poor man's crown, I said. Hard shell, soft middle. I heard. He took a bite. Chewed, swallowed, no praise, no performance. Just, you'll come with me to the city this afternoon. I frowned. Why? Your bakery had a visitor at dawn. The room lost temperature. Who? Someone looking for your father's office. My father had been dead 14 months. My hand stilled in the flour. Dante's voice stayed level. I think someone is already moving against us. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Masu appeared in the doorway, looked at the basket of rolls, and shut his eyes in religious pain. This, he said to no one, is targeted harassment. I almost laughed. Across the kitchen, Dante broke another piece of bread and stared at the soft half in silence. And for reasons I did not understand yet, I felt the story turning. Dante had seen beautiful women, brave women, useful women. He had buried some of them and protected others, and never once confused beauty for innocence. But the girl with flour on her wrists had done the one thing his world never did unwitnessed. She had given away the softer half and kept the ruined edge. No bargain, no audience, no request. When the bread cracked in his hand now, he heard another crust splitting in a cellar 15 years ago, and Lucia saying she wasn't hungry when she was. That was why he could not let Sofia Bellini leave. It had nothing to do with her mouth. That was the lie he told no one, especially himself. I learned the shape of fear by the sound of shoes on stone. That evening, the house had settled into a low-weather quiet. Rain pressed at the windows. Somewhere on the upper floor, Livia was arguing with Luca about church donations and tax strategy, which felt like an argument only rich Catholics and criminals could have with that much passion. I was in the smaller downstairs pantry, hands dusted with flour again, because dough calmed me better than breathing. The first gunshot hit the outer gate. The second sounded closer. By the time I straightened, the lights had gone out. Darkness swallowed the pantry whole. A hand closed around my wrist. I sucked in a breath sharp enough to hurt. Quiet, Dante said. His voice was right beside me. Another shot cracked through the house. Men shouted in Italian somewhere above us. The walls seemed to absorb it instead of echoing it back. He pulled me out of the pantry and into the corridor, one hand at my wrist, then my waist when I stumbled in the dark. His palm spanned half my side, heat through thin cotton. Nothing in my life had prepared me for how much a single, practical touch could rearrange me. We moved fast. The emergency lamps clicked on red along the baseboards, turning the hallway into something infernal. Armed men were already flowing toward the front of the house. Vittoria passed us at a run, a gun low in one hand, and snapped, "East wall breach. 2 down." Masso's yelling about geese again. From somewhere outside came Masso's outraged voice. "Those demon birds are not tactical assets." It was such an absurd sentence in the middle of gunfire that I almost lost my mind. Dante got me into a study behind the kitchen and shut the heavy door. The lock sounded old and certain. "Stay here," he said. "No," he turned. I had not meant to say it aloud. But it was there between us now. His face in the emergency glow was all carved shadow and patience stretched thin. "This is not a discussion." "Then stop making it sound like one." "If people are hurt," I said, "stay." The word struck the air flat and hard. I should have obeyed him. Instead, I took one step closer because fear had made me stupid or honest. "If you bleed all over your expensive floors while I sit in a locked room doing nothing, I'll never forgive you." His jaw shifted. Then so quickly I barely saw it, pain crossed his face. Not imagined, not metaphorical, real. He looked down. There was blood seeping through his sleeve. Everything in me went cold. "You're hurt. It's a graze. That is not comforting." A beat. Then he opened the door again and jerked his chin toward the kitchen. 1 minute. The kitchen emergency lights were dim and red. Rain hammered the windows. Somewhere above us, footsteps pounded and stopped and pounded again. Dante braced a hand on the steel counter while I yanked towels and vodka from a drawer with fingers that would not behave. "Sit," I said. He actually did. That was more shocking than the blood. His coat came off. Then the jacket. His white shirt beneath was ruined at the upper arm. I cut the sleeve with kitchen shears, trying not to notice the breadth of him, the scar crossing one rib, the quiet way he endured pain like it was a private habit. "It's not deep," I said. "I know, you always know everything." "No," I poured vodka over the wound. He didn't flinch. That bothered me more than if he had. "You're allowed to react," I muttered. "To this, to being hurt." His gaze lifted to mine. "I am reacting." There was too much in that answer. I looked away first. I bandaged him as neatly as I could. When I tied the cloth, my knuckles brushed the inside of his arm. He went very still, not predatory stillness, something far more dangerous, restraint. The storm shook the windows. I could smell gunpowder even through the bread and rain. "I know who you are," I said softly. "So does everyone." "That isn't what I meant." He watched me for a long second. "And yet you're here." Before I could answer, Livia entered with Luca behind her, perfectly composed except for the shotgun in Luca's hand, which felt unfairly elegant on him. Livia took in the scene once and said, "Good. She likes him best when he's bleeding. That's useful." "Ma," Dante said. She ignored him and came to stand beside me. "I owe you an apology, Sophia." I looked at her. "In the alley," she said, "I was not lost." I had dismissed my driver because Dante had told me, for the 1000th time, that the city no longer belonged to me in the way I thought it did. I wanted to remind him I had survived worse men than my son. "Mother," Dante said flatly. She smiled without warmth. And then I got hungry. I stared at her. She touched the basket of bread on the counter. "You gave me the soft half. You kept the burnt heel. You did not ask my name. You did not perform goodness. Do you know how rare that is around my son?" I didn't answer, because the answer was suddenly obvious. Very. Luca leaned against the doorway. I told him gratitude would look vulgar. Livia told him he was a donkey. "I was right," she said. Dante stood. He reached for the remaining half loaf on the counter, one of the dark rounds I had baked earlier, and broke off the burnt edge. Then, without ceremony, he ate it. I don't know why that undid me. Maybe because rich men weren't supposed to know what to do with ruined bread. Maybe because something in his face went far away when he chewed. Maybe because in all that violence and red light and storm, it looked like grief. Our eyes met. I forgot how to move. He took one step toward me. The room held its breath. Then Vittoria's voice came through the comm in Luca's ear. Clear, 2 intruders dead, 1 escaped. Dante's gaze stayed on mine another second. Then he stepped back. Of course he did, always 1 second before the edge. As he reached for his coat, Masso's voice floated in from the hall, strangled with outrage. If anyone asks, I was brave under attack and only screamed because a goose came at me with intent. The laugh burst out of me before I could stop it. Dante heard it. And for the first time I saw the corner of his mouth move, just once, like thunder too far away to trust. The next morning, Dante took me back to the bakery, not because he trusted the city. Because he didn't. The block looked normal in the way wounded things do when they insist on standing. The butcher next door hosed blood from his front step. Mrs. DeSantis from the flower stand pretended not to stare at the black SUVs. Somebody upstairs was playing Dean Martin too loudly. Little Italy kept surviving itself out of habit. Inside, the bakery smelled like flour, old sweetness, and the ghost of my father's aftershave in the office wood. I had not been back since Dante moved us. The second I stepped in, grief found me with both hands. Nico came behind me, quieter than usual. He touched the counter, the register, the cooling rack by the window. Then he went still in front of our father's office door. It's been searched, he said. He was right. The lock was broken. Drawers had been opened and shut without care. Accounting papers littered the floor like pale leaves. Dante stayed in the doorway while Vittoria and 2 men checked the back hall. He did not crowd me. He just stood there, one shoulder against the frame, filling the room with that impossible calm of his. What were they looking for? I asked. That, he said, nodding toward the overturned desk, is what I need you to tell me. I knelt and started gathering papers, receipts, sugar invoices, flour orders, utility bills. Then my hand touched the false bottom my father had built into the 3rd drawer when I was 14. He had shown it to me once, laughing. Said every honest businessman needed one dishonest hiding place. My stomach tightened. Slowly, I lifted the panel. Underneath was his recipe notebook. I closed my eyes. It was worn brown leather with grease on the corners, and his handwriting crammed into the margins. Every page crowded with measurements, oven temperatures, substitutions for hard years. It should have felt like comfort, instead it felt heavy. Dante crouched beside me, not touching, close enough to make the floor tilt. What is it? My father's recipes. Only, I swallowed. No, because tucked inside the middle pages were columns of numbers I had never understood. Dates, initials, delivery times disguised as proofing notes and cream weights. I had seen them after he died and hidden the book because I knew, instinctively, that men would kill for anything they made that careful. I didn't know what it was, I said. But you knew it was something. Yes. He took the notebook from me carefully, as if not to tear the dead with rough hands. He trusted you with it. He hid it from me. That isn't the same thing. Dante opened to a page and went still. What? These are shipment routes, he said. Warehouse codes, payoffs. For what? His jaw hardened. Not bread. The room seemed to narrow around us. Outside, Nico cursed softly. Vittoria had found the back door forced inward, splintered near the lock. Dante handed the notebook to Luca, who had just entered, all composure and expensive wool. Photograph every page. Luca's brows lifted. Well, our baker's daughter just became the most inconvenient girl in Manhattan. I wanted to be anywhere else. That was the first honest thought I had, after Luca Vanetti carried my father's recipe book out of the bakery like it was both evidence and a relic. Not home, because home now had splintered locks and strangers' fingerprints in the dust. Not the Salvetter estate, because every corridor there reminded me I was alive at Dante Salvetter's pleasure. Not inside my own skin, because my father had apparently died with a ledger hidden inside his recipes, and left me to discover it standing beside a man who looked made for bad news. So I stood in the middle of the office while the room pressed in around me and tried not to fall apart where anyone could see it. Nico shifted beside the door. "Saf, I'm fine." Dante looked at me once, and that was the problem with him. He never called lies by their name. He just waited until they embarrassed themselves. "You're pale," he said. "That's rude." "That wasn't a criticism," I laughed once. It came out thin and wrong. Luca returned from the front with Vittoria at his shoulder. "The pages are photographed." I'd prefer not to discuss the quantity of highly creative accounting hidden between sweet breads and feast cakes. "Can you read all of it?" I asked. "Some," Vittoria said. "Enough to know your father was cataloging payments, routes, and warehouse access. Enough to know someone very much wants those pages back." Nico swore under his breath. Dante's gaze cut to him. "You don't leave my sight again," Nico stiffened. "I didn't go anywhere. You got in debt to Bruno Peretti. That counts as travel. Under any other circumstances, I might have enjoyed that." Instead, I went to the office window and looked out at Mott Street, at the butcher, the flower stand, the old women carrying shopping bags like weapons. The neighborhood pretending it didn't recognize danger, parked at the curb in black SUVs. "My father sold bread," I said quietly. No one answered, because everyone in the room knew the sentence wasn't simple anymore. When we got back to the estate, the notebook went straight to the library. Not Dante's office, the library. Livia was already there, seated beneath a lamp with her glasses low on her nose and a rosary wrapped twice around one wrist as if prayer and strategy were cousins. She looked up when I entered. "Good. Sit, I don't think I'm in a sitting mood." "That is exactly why you should." I sat. That was becoming a pattern with her. The library smelled like old paper, beeswax, and the faint ghost of Dante's cedar cologne. Luca spread the photographed pages across the table. Vittoria stood at the far end with a tablet in hand. Nico hovered near the fire like a guilty spirit. Then Giulia Conti walked in carrying a black medical case and a level of irritation so refined it should have had a title. She was slim, dark-eyed, beautiful in the clipped, merciless way certain women are beautiful when they have no patience for stupidity. Her hair was pinned back. Her voice could probably cauterize a wound from 3 rooms away. She glanced at Dante's arm. "You bled through the bandage." Maso behind her looked personally thrilled by her existence and terrified by her mouth. "I told him," Maso announced. "No, you didn't," Giulia said. I thought it very loudly. She ignored him and set the case down. "Chair." Dante did not move. Giulia narrowed her eyes. "Dante." Livia turned one page of the notebook and said without looking up, "If you make my doctor repeat herself, I will tell the priest what you said at 14 about confession." Dante went to the chair. I had to look away so he wouldn't see the smile trying to happen. Giulia cut away the makeshift bandage I'd tied the night before. Her fingers were quick and clean. "Who did this?" "I did," I said. She glanced at me. Good tension, ugly knot. I was improvising under gunfire. "Fair." Maso put a hand over his chest. "See, this is why I love medicine. Such compassion." Giulia did not look at him. "If you eat one bread roll while I'm working, I'll have your cholesterol embalmed." Maso straightened like a soldier under fire. Luca sighed toward the ceiling. "Romance is alive." Despite everything, Nico barked a laugh. It broke something hard in the room, only for a second. Then Livia went still over one of the pages. "Wait," she said. Dante looked up from where Giulia was redressing his arm. "What?" She tapped a margin mark beside a recipe for almond biscuits. 2 small crosses. A crown shape scored above the title. My breath caught. "I've seen this," she said. Vittoria moved closer. "Where?" Livia's expression had gone far away. "My husband used a mark like this during the winter of the harbor strikes. When food couldn't move openly, he used parish kitchens, bakery vans, butcher deliveries. Quiet roots. Quiet mercy." Dante's face changed by a degree so slight most people would have missed it. I was learning not to be most people. He told me once, Livia said, that hunger makes radicals faster than speeches do, so he fed neighborhoods before anyone else could buy their loyalty. Luca looked down at the ledger pages again. And Cesare learned the roots. No one had said his name aloud yet. It landed in the library like a knife placed carefully on linen. My fingers tightened around the arm of my chair. Your uncle, Dante's voice was flat. Yes. Vittoria scrolled through the photograph pages. There are repeated notations beside several roots. Scalded milk, black rind, bitter almond, they may be warnings. At the last phrase, Dante went completely still. Giulia's hands paused at his arm for one fraction of a second. I looked from one face to another. What does bitter almond mean? No one answered quickly enough. That was answer enough. Finally, Luca said, gently for once, sometimes old codes were built from kitchen scents. Bitter almond meant contamination, tainted stock, something not safe to consume. My mouth went dry. Livia closed her eyes, and then I understood why the room had lost all warmth. The year written beside the first bitter almond notation matched the year Lucia died. I looked at Dante. He was staring at the page as if it had become a throat under his hand. Your uncle poisoned the root, I asked. No, he said. His voice was calm enough to frighten me. He diverted medicine. Silence. Then Nico said very softly, Jesus. Dante stood before Giulia had finished taping the clean bandage down. She cursed in elegant Italian. He ignored her. What else? He asked Vittoria. She scanned the pages again. 3 active warehouses, 2 shell owners already dead, payments moving through debt collections in Little Italy. And 1 repeated note in Bellini's hand. She turned the tablet toward us. At the bottom of 3 different pages in small script I knew better than my own heartbeat, my father had written the same sentence. The crown hides the name. I stared. Livia crossed herself. Luca exhaled slowly. Well, Maso from the doorway said, I'm no cryptographer, but that sounds terrible. Dante looked at me, not at the table, not at the pages, me. Did your father ever say that phrase to you? I shook my head. No. Then we find out what he meant. His voice did not rise. It didn't need to. The air in the library had already changed. This was no longer about a girl the wrong men had noticed. No longer about debt. No longer even about gratitude. It was about hunger and memory and a dead baker who had hidden a war inside his recipes. And when Dante said, no one leaves this house tonight, I believed him for the first time, not because he was dangerous, but because he was afraid. The estate had a room just for dough. Of course it did. A warm tiled chamber off the main kitchen where trays could rest and rise in steady heat, as if even bread was expected to become its best self under Salvatore's supervision. I found it after midnight because I could not sleep, and because panic, like hunger, had always sent me toward flour. The notebook lay open on the stainless counter outside, copied pages weighted by a jar of salt and one of Luca's expensive pens. I had spent 3 hours staring at my father's handwriting until the letters blurred into grief. Measurements, times, feast names, margin notes, and everywhere codes hiding in plain sight. I pressed my palms into dough and tried to think like him. Poor years had made my father practical, secretive only when secrecy could feed someone. He would not have hidden a message in anything ornamental. He would have hidden it where hands already knew to go. Behind me, a voice said, "You need when you're angry." I didn't jump. That should have worried me more than it did. Dante stood in the doorway in dark trousers and a black sweater. No coat, no tie, no armor except the one he was born in. His hair was still damp, as if he'd showered and failed to wash the violence off. "I need when I'm anything," I said. He came closer, his gaze moving over the counter, the copied pages, the scored dough. "And tonight, I pushed harder with the heel of my hand. Pick a feeling. He was quiet for a moment. Then Giulia says if you keep pressing on one side like that, the loaf will bake unevenly. I looked up. He did not smile. I did anyway. That the same Giulia who threatened to embalm Masso's arteries. The very one. How is he alive? He thinks it's love. And what does she think? Dante considered. That depends how forgiving she feels toward his cholesterol. I let out a breath that almost qualified as laughter. It felt treacherous in the middle of all this, like finding a coin in a church pew. He came to stand beside me, not touching, close enough for danger, close enough that the warmth from the proofing room behind us curled around both of us at once. "What are you seeing?" he asked. I pointed at one copied page. "These aren't just recipes, you know that." "Yes, but I think the actual recipes matter too." His eyes went to my hand. "Explain." I turned the page toward him. "This one is for poor man's crown. My father never wrote it down in full because he knew it by heart, but here he did." I tapped the scoring notes. "See these cuts, 4 around the top. 1 deep in the center. That isn't how he actually baked it. He made 6. Dante leaned in. I could smell cedar again, soap, night air, and the deep center cut came last. I looked up at him. "Not first," he changed the order. "Why? Maybe it's not baking instruction, maybe it's sequence." He went still, opened the notebook to every crown recipe. We did. There were 5, poor man's crown. Easter crown. Sesame crown, widow's crown, St. Joseph ring loaf, which my father had renamed in the margin with a tiny sketch of a crown over the halo. Across all of them, the cuts were described in different orders. Luca's voice floated in from the doorway. "I leave you alone for 1 hour, and you start a secret bakery society." Neither of us had heard him come in. He took in the spread pages, the dough, the two of us standing too close over a dead man's handwriting, and his mouth did something knowing and irritating. "I assume," he said, "that the smoldering silence is productive." "Crown recipes," Dante said. Luca blinked. "Excellent, we're all starving and doomed." I ignored him. "The cuts may correspond to letters, or names, the order matters." Luca pulled a chair out and sat backward on it, expensive suit and all. "Now this I enjoy. Criminal conspiracy solved by carbohydrates." Dante's eyes stayed on the pages. "The crown hides the name." That sentence again. It felt like standing at the edge of a locked room and hearing breath on the other side. Nico stumbled in next, half awake and fully guilty, hair sticking up, face drawn. "Masso said you were all downstairs talking to Bread." "Accurate," Luca said. Nico rubbed his eyes, then froze when he saw the notebook. "You found something." "Maybe," I said. "Think." "Did Papa ever say anything about crowns, or cuts, or names hidden in recipes?" Nico frowned, really frowned. It made him look younger and older all at once. Then something shifted in his face. "When I was little," he said slowly, "he used to yell if I scored the top before the sides." My head snapped up. "What?" "He said the center always came last. Said if you cut the heart first, the whole thing collapsed." The kitchen went quiet. Nico stared at the notebook, lost in memory now. And once he swallowed. Once I heard him fighting on the phone. I don't know with who, but he said, "You made children drink water and call it milk while you paid for bullets." Dante turned his head. "Did he say a name?" he asked. Nico's voice was almost a whisper. "Falco." No one moved. The only sound in the room was the soft ticking of the oven and the small living sighs of dough rising in heat. Dante looked at the copied crown recipes again, then at me. "Score the loaf," he said. I stared at him. "Now?" "Yes." So I did. I took the small sharp blade and cut the dough in the sequence written in my father's false instructions. Side, 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 then center. When the last cut opened, the dough relaxed under my hand, not collapsed, opened. Luca saw it first. "Letters," he said, "the pattern of the cuts, the angle of them, the shape left behind, not random." An M. I looked at the next recipe. different sequence, different pressure depths. A chapel of silence built itself around the counter. We worked through 3 more. M-A-R-E Mar, Nico began. The final loaf pattern lay on the last page, Widow's Crown, written beside an old feast day. I scored it with hands that had stopped feeling like my own. In Marin, Dante's voice was low. Warehouse Marin. Vittoria appeared in the doorway as if summoned by the possibility of blood. Pier 42, old cold storage facility on the river. One of Cesar's dormant properties. Luca stood. Well, that seems inconvenient. Dante was already reaching for his phone. I caught his wrist before I thought better of it. He stopped. So did everyone else. You can't just storm in, I said. If my father hid the name this carefully, there's more there than shipments. His eyes dropped to my hand on him, then rose to my face. Little saint, he said softly, that is exactly why I'm going. The name did dangerous things when he said it quietly. I let go first. Behind us, something in the proofing room shifted. A tray expanding under heat, a loaf growing into the shape it had been waiting for. Later, after Vittoria and Luca were gone to prepare, after Nico had been marched upstairs by Maso under heavy complaint, Dante stayed. Just long enough to say, without looking at me, "You were right. Your father built the answer inside the bread." I set down the blade. You say that like it surprises you. It surprises me that he trusted the living thing instead of the written one. I looked at the dough. Bread tells the truth faster than paper. At that, something passed across his face. Old, hurt. Sometimes, he said, paper is all the dead leave. Then he turned to go. Dante, he stopped at the doorway. What does bitter almond mean to you? I asked, a long silence. Then he said, it means I was 12 the last time I believed hunger was an accident, and left me alone with rising dough, my father's ghosts, and a heart that had become a far more dangerous thing than fear. The chapel on the Salvator grounds was smaller than I expected. Private, old, and built by people who intended their sins to have excellent acoustics. Livia took me there the next morning, before anyone else was awake enough to interfere. She wore black wool and pearls, like every elegant Catholic widow who had ever weaponized grief into social authority. I carried the notebook under my coat. There are things men only remember halfway, she said as we walked. Churches remember better. That sounds ominous. It's Catholicism, Sophia. Ominous is part of the aesthetic. The chapel smelled like wax, dust, and cold stone. Colored light fell thin through stained glass. St. Lucy stood in one window holding her impossible eyes and her martyr's calm. I stared up at her and felt the blood leave my face. Livia noticed. Yes, she said. Lucia loved that window. I turned to her slowly. She touched the pew once absently. My daughter used to light candles here and ask saints for things she should have asked doctors for. I didn't know what to say to that, so I said the only true thing available. I'm sorry. Livia's smile was tired and iron deep. So am I. We went to the back vestry where old parish ledgers had been boxed and forgotten. Donation books, supply manifests, feast inventories. The kind of records no one destroys because no one imagines they matter. Except old men who move mercy through kitchens. Except bakers. Except criminals. By the 3rd box, my fingers were black with dust. By the 5th, I found it. A ledger from the winter Luca had mentioned. Harbor strikes, shortages, church kitchens feeding entire blocks. Tucked between donation entries and candle purchases were initials I now recognized from my father's notebook. MBCF LS Salvator Relief, Falco Access, Bellini Deliveries. The pages shook in my hands. Livia leaned over my shoulder. There, at the bottom of one entry beside St. Lucy's feast, a note in my father's handwriting had been added years later in faded brown ink. He took the milk. He took the medicine. God sees hunger even when men rename it business. I closed my eyes. When I opened them, Dante was standing in the vestry doorway. Of course he was. "How long have you been there?" I asked. "Long enough." His voice had gone flat in that frightening, depthless way of his. Livia handed him the parish ledger. He read the line once. Nothing on his face changed. That was worse than anger. Behind him, Vittoria appeared with her phone already in hand. "We need to leave, now." The word cracked through the little room. Dante looked up. "Why? 2 vehicles at the lower gate, not ours." Livia sighed toward the crucifix. "If this becomes a gunfight in front of St. Lucy, I will be deeply annoyed." What happened next moved too fast for prayer and too slowly for comfort. Dante took my wrist, not roughly, not gently. With certainty. He got Livia behind him with one motion, me with another, and pushed us through the side sacristy door just as the first shot shattered one of the outer chapel windows. Glass rained across stone. I heard Maso somewhere outside yell, "I hate holy ambushes." Then another voice, Giulia's sharp as a blade, "Get down, idiot." We ran, past the side garden, past the clipped hedges and winter statues, past 2 guards already returning fire from behind low walls. Livia, impossibly, never lost her balance once. I stumbled on wet stone. Dante caught me at the waist and hauled me against him so hard my breath vanished. A bullet smacked into the wall behind us. He turned, body between mine and the sound, gun already in his hand. I had seen him dangerous before. I had not seen him like this. No hesitation, no visible fury. Just lethal accuracy and the terrifying stillness of a man doing what he had been taught before he was old enough to refuse it. He fired twice. Somewhere beyond the hedge, someone screamed. My whole body went cold. Dante pushed me down behind a low marble planter. "Stay." There it was again. The command that sounded like protection and possession wearing the same coat. Livia crouched on my other side, neat as if we were sheltering from bad weather instead of gunfire. She glanced at me. "You see why I argue with him so much?" I stared at her. She patted my hand once. "If I didn't, all this brooding would win." I almost laughed. Then Dante moved out from cover and laughter died where it started. He crossed the garden with terrible purpose, Vittoria flanking left, 2 men behind. Another car tire burst under gunfire. One attacker went down trying to reach the chapel wall. Another ran for the broken gate. Maso tackled him with all the offended force of a man interrupted before breakfast and rolled hard into the gravel, cursing in 3 languages. Later I would remember that detail and almost smile. In the moment, all I could see was Dante. All I could think was that he looked like judgment made human. The fight ended in under 2 minutes. Violence rarely lasted as long as fear suggested it would. That was one of its ugliest tricks. Afterward, rain began. Thin, cold, indecisive rain that dotted the marble saints and turned the shattered chapel window into a dark, jeweled wound. Dante came back to us with blood on his knuckles that was not his own. He looked at me once, just once, to confirm I was intact, then away. That hurt more than it should have. Inside the house, he disappeared into the security room with Vittoria and Luca. Livia went to supervise damage with the composure of a woman who refused to let gunmen interfere with liturgical order. I found Dante an hour later in the boxing room below the west stairs. The heavy bag swung once under his fist and came back for more. He had taken off his jacket, rolled his sleeves. His arm, the one I'd bandaged, had bled through again. "You're reopening stitches as a hobby now?" I asked. He didn't turn. "You shouldn't be here." And yet, the bag shuddered under another hit. I came farther into the room. "You knew," his fist stilled. "You knew your uncle took medicine that winter. I knew he chose shipments over people." Dante turned then, chest rising once hard. "I did not know my father tried to stop him through Bellini roots. I did not know your father kept records. I did not know Lucia's death had an account line." The last sentence landed like stone. I looked at him, really looked, at the brutal restraint in his shoulders, at the blood on the wraps around his hands, at the grief trying to wear Rage's face. She gave you the soft half too, I said. His gaze snapped to mine. I hadn't meant to say it, but there it was. His voice dropped. Who told you? No one. Silence. Then very quietly, yes. Everything inside me ached. She was feverish, he said, staring somewhere over my shoulder now, into a year that still held him by the throat. We were hiding in a cellar after a betrayal. We had one loaf left. She broke it and gave me the middle, said she hated soft bread. A humorless breath left him. She was 8, a terrible liar. I stood perfectly still. If my uncle had brought the medicine he promised, Dante said, she would have lived until morning, maybe longer. He brought ammunition instead. There are griefs so old they stop sounding dramatic. They just sound factual. I went to him before I had the sense not to. Put my flour-rough hand, because of course I still had flour on me. I always did now, against his wrapped fist. He looked down at it like it was a dangerous object, then up at me. Dante, I said, and his name felt like stepping onto something thin over deep water. What happened to her was not business. No, it was cruelty. His jaw shifted. That's not the same thing. For one strange suspended second he looked almost young, not softer, never that, just wounded in a place too old to scar right. The distance between us became the kind people notice only when it's about to disappear. Then Vittoria's voice came through the calm at his belt. We found one alive. Dante closed his eyes once. When he opened them, the old shutters were back in place. Of course they were. Stay inside tonight, he said. And left me in the boxing room with the swinging bag, the smell of leather and blood, and the certainty that I had just touched the most dangerous part of him. And it had not been the violence. That night I made bread for a dead girl. I didn't say that aloud, obviously. Even I had enough self-preservation left not to announce my private unraveling to the Salvetter kitchen staff. But the truth of it was there anyway. I started after midnight, when the house had gone dim and tired, and the worst of the day had sunk beneath its own weight. I mixed flour and salt and yeast and warm water, added a little honey because 8-year-old girls deserved sweetness where they could get it, and a little milk because I was angry at the past and didn't know what else to do with that. I shaped the loaf small, the size of a secret. When it baked, the crust browned dark and fragrant. I waited until it cooled just enough to hold, then took it to the terrace outside the kitchen where the night was cold and the garden statues looked judgmental. Dante was already there. Of course he was. He stood at the stone balustrade in shirt sleeves, the city a low gold bruise in the distance. He didn't turn when I stepped out. You haunt kitchens, he said. You bleed on them. We all have hobbies. At that, the side of his mouth moved once. Not a smile, not one either. I held up the loaf. I made this, for me, for Lucia. That got his attention. He turned. The night made his face harsher, but his eyes had lost some of their armored distance. Tired then, tired and sharp and older than he should have been. I crossed to the small iron table between us and set the loaf down. He stared at it. It's sweet bread, I said. A little, nothing too cheerful. I didn't know what she liked. He was silent for long enough that I thought maybe I had overstepped so badly I'd have to throw myself into the fountain. Then he said, orange. I looked up. She liked orange peel in everything, he said. Even when we couldn't afford it, she said it made poor food taste dressed for church. My throat tightened, so I sat, and after a moment he sat too. The loaf rested between us under moonlight, dark crust, warm scent, one simple thing made by hand in a world that specialized in ruin. I broke it open. The crack of the crust split the night in two. Steam lifted, soft middle, dark edges. I started to turn the better half toward him out of pure instinct. He saw it, his gaze dropped to my hand. Then he did something so small it felt enormous. He put his fingers over mine and turned the loaf back. No, he said. The word was quiet, not command. Not refusal, something else. He broke off the burnt heel for himself and left the soft center with me. I could not breathe for a second. "You don't have to do that," I whispered. "I know." We ate in silence. He chewed slowly like a man translating grief through taste. The night held still around us. After a while he said, "Your father wasn't dirty." I looked up sharply. "I know that because dirty men don't keep records that could bury them." Dante tore another piece of crust free. "He was trying to stop something. He never told me. He was protecting you." I laughed softly without humor. "That seems to be a hobby men collect around me." His eyes lifted. "You dislike it." "I dislike being handled. That is not the same thing. It feels the same from the inside." That landed. He leaned back in the chair, the terrace light catching the scar near his throat. "Then hear this clearly. If I wanted to control you, you would know it." The honesty of that should have terrified me. Instead, it made heat unspool low in my stomach. I looked away first, badly. His voice dropped. "Sophia." No one had ever said my name like it was both restraint and surrender. I hated how much I wanted to hear it again. "What?" I asked, though it came out thin. He was looking at my mouth. That felt like a problem, a serious one. "You should be afraid of me," he said. I swallowed. "I am." "No," a beat. "Not in the way that would keep you safe." The truth of that moved through me like a match put to old paper. I should have stood. I should have gone inside. I should have remembered every whispered story about men like him, and all the reasons women with sense did not sit in the dark feeding them memory and sweetness. Instead I said, "And you should let your doctor finish your bandages." Something like frustration flashed in his face. Then without warning he laughed, quiet, brief, real. I stared at him. "What? You are impossible at the strangest times." "So are you." We were very close to each other all at once. I did not remember moving. Neither, I think, did he. His hand came to my jaw with a gentleness so at odds with the rest of him I nearly shook apart from it. Thumb at my chin, fingers warm behind my ear. He gave me every chance to lean away. I didn't. He kissed me like restraint first, like a question he already knew the answer to and hated that he needed anyway. Slow, careful. Warm breath and colder air and the taste of sweet bread still on both of us. Nothing theatrical, nothing greedy, which made it far worse. My hand found his wrist, then his shoulder. Then I was the one leaning into him, and he made a sound so low and rough it went straight through me. When he pulled back, it was barely an inch. His forehead touched mine. "This," he said, voice wrecked in a way I had not thought him capable of, "is a terrible idea." Yes, I should stop. Yes, he didn't. Neither did I. The second kiss was not restraint. It was hunger, not cruel, not careless, but hungry in the way starving people are honest. When he finally let me go, the loaf sat broken between us, half gone. My lips felt swollen. My pulse was everywhere. The world had become newly dangerous in ways gunmen could not improve. Dante looked at the bread, then at me. "Lucia would have liked you," he said. It was the most intimate thing he could have offered, and he knew it. I had no defense against that. None. So I told the truth. "She would have saved you first, too." Something changed in his face. Deep, wordless, final. And when he kissed my forehead once before standing, it felt less like seduction than a vow neither of us had agreed to make, and both of us had already broken. Nico disappeared at noon. Not vanished in a mysterious, elegant way. Vanished in the stupid, brutal way 19-year-old boys do when shame outruns common sense. One missing guard on the east path. One kitchen camera catching Nico pulling on a borrowed coat and walking fast. One gate contact paid off or frightened enough to look the other way for 30 seconds. By the time Vittoria came into the breakfast room with murder in her posture and a phone in her hand, Dante already knew. He stood before she finished speaking. "How long?" 23 minutes, she said. Luca swore softly. Massa put down the espresso pot with the expression of a man who understood that caffeine was no longer the day's biggest emergency. Tell me he just went to smoke behind the garage and make bad life choices. No, Vittoria said. Nico's phone had been left on his bed. There was a note. 3 words in his rushed, guilty handwriting. I'll fix it. I read it once and sat down because my knees had abruptly developed opinions. Oh, that idiot, I whispered. Dante took the note from my hand. Not rough. Never rough with me when it mattered most. His face did not change as he read it. That made the room colder. Lock the grounds, he said. They already are, Vittoria replied. Then find who opened them. Livia entered at that moment, saw our faces, and did not waste a second on confusion. Which child has done something catastrophic? Nico, Luca said. She shut her eyes once. Of course. The message came 40 minutes later, not to me, to Dante, private number, audio only. Cesare Falco's voice arriving through the speaker with the dry ease of a man who had always mistaken cruelty for intelligence. Nephew. Dante put the call on speaker and set it on the table. Smart. Because witnesses make monsters less grand. You've taken something of mine, Cesare said. Dante's voice went colder than the marble under my palms. You mean the evidence Bellini kept on you? A soft laugh crackled through the line. I mean the girl. Something in Dante's face became still enough to cut skin. Across the table, Livia's rosary clicked once against her ring. Cesare went on. The boy came to bargain, admirable in its stupidity. I've always preferred family leverage when it walks in on its own feet. My breath stuttered. Proof of life, Dante said. A scuffle, Nico's voice tight and furious. Go to hell. Then a blow. A choked sound. I was on my feet before I knew I'd moved. Dante's hand closed around my wrist, hard enough to stop me, not hard enough to hurt. Cesare laughed again. Still soft in odd places, aren't you? Dante said nothing. That was somehow more frightening than if he had promised murder. The notebook, Cesare said, and the baker's daughter, midnight. Pier 42. Bring soldiers and I'll return the boy in pieces small enough to fit pastry boxes. The line went dead. No one in the room breathed for a second. Then I said, absolutely not. Every head turned. I pulled my wrist free of Dante's grip. He wants me there because he thinks I'm the part you'll break over. Which means if I'm not there, he hurts Nico to force your hand. You are not going, Dante said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Livia sat down slowly. Unfortunately, the girl is not wrong. Dante turned to her. Ma, don't ma me in that tone. It offends my motherhood. Luca pinched the bridge of his nose. We could bring a decoy. Vittoria shook her head. Cesare will prepare for that. Maso looked at me, then at Dante and muttered, I miss when my biggest problem was not being allowed cannoli. Giulia, who had entered halfway through the call carrying a tray of fresh bandages, because apparently disaster attracted her professionally, set it down with surgical precision. Nico's reckless, she said, not stupid. If he walked into this knowingly, he was trying to buy time. Her dark eyes moved to me. Use it. Dante looked at her like he could fire people with concentration alone. Giulia folded her arms. You can glare after I save your family. Again, I went to the counter where the copied ledger pages still lay beneath a ceramic bowl of blood oranges. The crown hides the name. My father's words looked different now, less like clue, more like instruction. Wait, I said. I pulled the poor man's crown recipe toward me, then the parish ledger, then the page marked bitter almond. Dante came beside me, too close for thinking. I forced my thoughts into order anyway. My father didn't just hide warehouse names, I said. He hid sequences, routes, maybe exits. Vittoria was already at my shoulder. Show me. I pointed at the scoring order. 6 cuts, 5 around the edges, 1 through the middle. What if it's not letters this time? Map sectors, she said instantly. Or access points, Luca added. I traced the pattern on the back of the paper, rotated it, and felt my pulse spike. There, Pier 42's old floor plan. One Vittoria pulled up on her tablet, had 5 outer loading bays around a central refrigeration chamber. One deep center cut. One heart. The middle, I whispered. That's where he'll keep Nico. Dante's gaze stayed on the plan. Hidden exit, I checked the widow's crown sequence. Side cuts, pause, side, deep center, final edge split. North Bay, I said. After the chamber, last cut is the escape. Vittoria's eyes sharpened. Old service tunnel to the river. Luca smiled without humor. Bellini, I'm beginning to see why men are getting shot over your family recipes. I barely heard him, because Dante had turned to me. No, he said. I stared. No what? No, you're not walking into that warehouse for him. He asked for me. He can ask for the Pope. This is my brother, and you are not a bargaining chip. The room went silent. There it was, the thing underneath all of this. I lifted my chin, then stopped talking about me like property with opinions. His jaw flexed. Livia muttered, "Oh, finally." No one acknowledged her because the air between Dante and me had become too tight for secondary conversations. I am talking about keeping you alive, he said. And I am talking about not letting my brother die because your protective instincts have delusions of monarchy. Mas whispered, awestruck. Madonna, Giulia elbowed him without taking her eyes off us. Dante stepped closer, not touching, never careless in front of witnesses, but the force of him hit just the same. Do you think, he asked softly, that I would survive handing you to him? The whole room stilled. I forgot every prepared sentence I had. That was the first mistake. The second was answering honestly. I think, I said, my voice no steadier than my pulse, you're already not surviving this. Something raw flickered across his face, gone in a blink. Then he turned to Vittoria. Prepare the team. To take Sofia, Vittoria asked, to end my uncle, which was not technically an answer. But when the room cleared around strategy and weapons and routes, he caught my hand as I tried to move away. Only for a second, only until I looked at him. If anything goes wrong, he said quietly, for me alone now, you run for the river tunnel, you do not come back for anyone. Dante, no heroics. I'm a baker. You're worse. You feed strays. I should not have smiled. I did anyway. His thumb brushed my knuckles once, a betrayal by skin. Then he let go. At midnight, I was wearing black wool, a hidden earpiece, my father's notebook inside my coat, and Dante Salvator's kiss still burning like a secret I had no business keeping. Pier 42 smelled like salt, rust, diesel, and old cold. The river slapped black against pilings beyond the loading docks. Wind moved through broken panes high above, turning loose chains into small metallic prayers. Once, decades ago, the place had stored fish and imported fruit and the ordinary commerce of a city that liked to eat. Now it held men with guns, and my brother. Cesar Falco had taste in the way snakes have shine. He chose the central chamber exactly where the crown sequence said he would, beneath dead refrigeration units and flaking white paint, as if even his crimes preferred theatrical decay. Nico was tied to a chair beneath a hanging work light. His left cheek was bruised, one eye swollen, angry enough to still look like himself. Relief hit so hard it hurt. Then I saw Cesar. He stood beside Nico in a camel coat too, elegant for the warehouse, silver hair neat, hands ungloved despite the cold. He looked like the kind of old-world gentleman who donated to cathedrals and ruined families before lunch. I understood at once why Dante had learned stillness as a weapon. It ran in the blood. Dante walked in beside me with Luca half a step behind, Vittoria invisible somewhere in the bones of the building, Masso and 2 others covering the outer bays. I could feel all of it. The pressure of hidden men, the held breath of strategy, the weight of the notebook under my coat. Cesar smiled when he saw me. Ah, the little charity project. Everything in me recoiled. Beside me, Dante said, let the boy go. Cesar looked at Nico, then back at Dante. You brought the girl, good. I was beginning to think gratitude had made you sentimental, Luca sighed. It did. We're all suffering. No one laughed. Cesare extended a hand. The notebook. I pulled it out, the real one or what looked like it. Luca's copy sat safe elsewhere, translated, photographed, duplicated like a disease. I stepped forward once. Dante's hand brushed the small of my back. One touch, steadying or warning, maybe both. Cesare watched it happen and smiled wider. Now that is interesting. Take it, I said. His eyes moved over me. Your father was a disappointment. Rage flashed clean and cold through my chest. Then it must upset you that he outlived your caution. Your father, Cesare said almost pleasantly, forgot his place. Men like Bellini survive by baking for power, not by recording it. He recorded theft, Cesare shrugged. I redirected supply. The city rewards men who anticipate scarcity. Nico spat blood toward his shoe, missed, still worth admiring. Cesare glanced down, mildly annoyed. You see, family spirit. Tiresome but textured. Dante's voice became almost gentle. You took medicine meant for children. At that, Cesare finally looked at him properly. There it was. The real conversation beneath the current one. Medicine, Cesare said, doesn't build armies. No, Dante said, it saves lives. Cesare's expression changed. A little contempt, a little boredom. And where did that get your father, or Lucia? Everything stopped. Even the river seemed to hold still. I saw Dante go empty in the face in the way men go empty when murder becomes simpler than speech. Cesare smiled. He had wanted that. Wanted the name out in the open like acid. My mistake, he said, was thinking grief would harden you properly. Instead, it made you theatrical, protective. Predictable. He lifted his gun and placed it lightly against Nico's head. Now, he said to me, bring me the notebook. I walked forward, 1 step, 2, 3. Every nerve in my body screamed, but beneath it was something steadier now. My father's hands guiding dough. Center last, heart last. Do not give them the living part first. At 6 feet away, I stopped. Cesare frowned. Closer. No, the word echoed, not loudly, not dramatically, but enough. I opened the notebook in my hands, turned not to the ledger pages. To poor man's crown, then widow's crown, then the page my father had marked with that one terrible note. He didn't just record your roots, I said. Cesare's eyes narrowed. He recorded your buyers. Your police, your judges, your priest on Mulberry who blessed stolen food for a cut. He hid the names in crown loaves because he knew men like you never notice what feeds them. Behind me, I felt rather than saw Dante understanding. Cesare smiled thinly. And where are these names now? I tore the notebook cleanly in half. Gasps. Nico swore. Cesare's face finally changed. Not much, but enough. Vittoria, Dante said into the silence. Now. Gunfire exploded from the catwalk above. Lights shattered. The chamber plunged into strobing dark and sparks. Nico kicked hard, chair tipping sideways as Cesare's nearest man turned to fire. Luca was already moving, drawing from under that expensive coat with the resignation of a man whose evening had gone exactly as predicted. Masso came through the side bay yelling, "This is why no one deserves biscotti." Chaos took the room. Cesare grabbed for me. Of course he did. His hand closed on my coat collar and jerked me sideways just as Dante crossed the distance between us like judgment breaking into a run. I heard 2 shots, felt one pass the air beside my face. Cesare dragged me back against him, gun at my throat now, breath hot and ugly at my ear. Tell them to stop, he said. I didn't, because Dante had gone still, and I knew that stillness now. Knew it meant he was nearest to violence when he looked most made of stone. Dante, Cesare called over the gunfire and echo, be useful. Your father never managed it. Your mother never learned discretion. Your sister, the shot rang before he finished. Not Dante S. Livia S. She stood at the broken chamber entrance in black wool and pearls, arm extended, a small pistol steady in her hand like old nobility had decided enough was enough. Cesare jerked. The bullet tore through his shoulder, spinning him half around. I dropped hard and ran, not because I was brave. Because Dante had told me once to run if things went wrong, and I was finally wise enough to obey him on the correct occasion. Then Dante was on Cesare. No gun, hands. The sound of the impact when they hit the concrete was awful in its intimacy. Cesare fought dirty, old, desperate. Dante fought like a man who had been carrying this exact shape of violence inside him since boyhood. A punch, an elbow, a crack that might have been bone. Nico yelled something from the floor. Maso crashed into one of Cesare's men near the loading bay. Vittoria's voice cut sharp through comms and echoes. But all I could see was Dante with his uncle's coat twisted in his fist and murder in both hands. Cesare laughed blood, actually laughed. "She still died hungry," he said. Dante's grip tightened. I saw the exact second he became willing to kill more slowly than necessary. That was the second I moved. Dante. He didn't hear me, or he did and could not come back. So I crossed the concrete, grabbed his jaw in both hands and forced his face toward mine. Dante. His eyes found me, not his uncle, not the blood, me. "Don't let him choose what survives in you," I said. Everything held, the whole warehouse, the river, the ghosts. Then behind us, Livia stepped closer, her voice cold enough to freeze sacramental wine. "That," she said to Cesare, "was for the children." And she shot him again. Center chest, heart last. Cesare Falco looked surprised, then dead. Silence came in pieces. Gunfire stopping one corner at a time. Chains stilling overhead. Nico coughing on the floor while Luca cut him loose. Maso saying, breathless and offended, "If anyone died on me before I got dessert, I'd have been furious." I sat down hard on the concrete because my legs had resigned. Dante stayed where he was for 1 second too long. Then he stood, turned, came to me. Dropped to one knee in front of me with blood on his hands, his breathing rough, his face wrecked open in ways I had never seen. He touched my cheek like he was checking I was real. Sophia, just that, my name, like prayer, like apology, like he had come back from somewhere and hated the road. I put my hand over his. "I'm here," I said. And for the first time since I'd known him, Dante Salvator closed his eyes like relief hurt. 3 days later, the bakery reopened. Not because life had become simple. Because bread had to be baked whether men deserved it or not. There were fresh locks on the doors. New cameras tucked discreetly above the shelves. A Salvator sedan parked half a block down pretending it belonged to no one important. Mrs. DeSantis brought flowers for atmosphere, which in Little Italy also meant for surveillance. The butcher next door sent over sausage rolls and the information that he saw nothing, heard less, but respects the management. Nico was bruised, contrite, and so helpful it was briefly suspicious. Giulia had threatened to re-break his fingers if he ever tried self-sacrifice through idiocy again. He believed her, which was healthy. Maso came by twice a day under the excuse of security assessment, and spent both visits staring at the bread with the tragic longing of a monk tempted by sin. Giulia collected him once by the ear. He went willingly, which told me everything and gave me ammunition forever. The neighborhood, true to form, adapted around scandal like ivy around stone. And my father became someone larger and stranger and more heartbreaking than I had known. Luca brought the final translations that afternoon in a neat folder. The ledger had not been proof of my father's corruption. It had been proof of his refusal. Years ago, when Cesare began using old church and bakery routes to divert food shipments, medicines, and debt payments through neighborhood businesses. My father had played along just long enough to document names, dates, warehouses, police contacts, judges on payroll, parish intermediaries. He had hidden them in recipes because no one searched bread until they were already hungry. He had meant, Luca thought, to take the records to Dante's father. Then the old man died. Then Lucia died. Then fear did what fear always does. It narrowed the future until survival looked like silence. He was trying to find the right moment, I said. Luca nodded. Cowardice and prudence are cousins. The difference is usually funerals. I looked down at the folder. Did he get anyone killed? No, came Dante's voice from the doorway. He kept enough alive for the truth to matter. Luca left us alone after that with the discretion of a man who enjoyed knowing things more than witnessing them. The bakery was closed for the evening. Downstairs, the ovens gave off their last low heat. Upstairs, the apartment still smelled faintly of soap, and my father's desk wood, and all the years before trouble learned our name. Dante stood just inside the office door, coat unbuttoned, dark hair still wind-touched from the street. His presence changed the room the way storms changed air. I leaned against the desk. "You're late. I had to finish burying my uncle." That was not a sentence designed for romance, and yet the way he said it, tired, unadorned, almost honest enough to bruise, went through me anyway. "I'm sorry," I said. He studied me. "For which part?" "All of it." His gaze lowered, then lifted again. "Don't apologize for surviving him." I exhaled. Then asked the question that had been waiting under everything else. "What happens now?" He stepped farther into the room, not very far. Far enough that I could smell cedar and cold November darkness on him. "The businesses he was buying through debt collections revert or are sold clean," he said. "The police names are already being handled. The routes are burned. Your bakery is yours." Mine, such a small word for such a terrifying mercy. "And the arrangement?" I asked. 42 days. 6 weeks. One rule, total obedience. The shape of the bargain we had both already outgrown. Dante went still in that particular way of his, but there was no threat in it now. Only care taken with something that might break if mishandled. "The arrangement ends," he said. That should have felt like relief. Instead, it felt like standing very calmly on the edge of a roof. He saw it happen on my face. His own changed too, barely, enough. "You can stay here tonight if you want," he added, "or at the estate. Or tell me never to cross your threshold again, and I won't." I looked at him, at the man who had dragged me into danger for my own safety. At the man who had bled on marble and eaten burnt bread like memory. At the man who had kissed me like restraint failing on purpose. At the man now offering me freedom in a voice that made it sound like loss. "You would obey that?" I asked. His answer came without hesitation. "If you asked it." The room went very quiet. Then I pushed off the desk, went past him into the small kitchen and reached for the loaf I had baked that morning. Poor man's crown, my father's recipe, hard shell, soft middle. I brought it back to the table between us. He watched without speaking. I broke the loaf. The crust cracked. That sound again, the one that had started all of this. Only this time, when I turned the pieces in my hands, he stopped me with a glance. Slowly, deliberately, Dante took the soft half and gave it to me. Then he kept the burnt heel for himself. My eyes stung so suddenly I hated him for seeing it. He did see it. Of course he did. "Sophia," he said quietly, "I knew what you were the first night." I swallowed. A fool in an alley, a mercy with bad instincts. Despite everything, I laughed. His thumb brushed the rough edge of crust in his hand. "I thought if I kept you close enough I could contain what you made me remember." "And did you?" "No." He did not smile. "Neither did I." "Good," I said. That got one out of him then. Small, real. He came around the table slowly, like a man approaching something holy and therefore dangerous. Stopped in front of me close enough that the world narrowed to breath and bread and the old ache beneath both. "I can give you security," he said. "Money, protection, space. Distance if that is what you want." I looked up at him. "And if it is?" The question stayed between us, open and alive. His hand came to my face, warm, certain. Reverent in the way only dangerous men can be reverent, fully aware of what their hands are capable of, and choosing gentleness anyway. Then, Dante said, voice roughened down to truth, I ask instead of ordering. That undid me more thoroughly than blood, gunfire, or grief ever had. I put my loaf piece down on the table and caught his wrist. Ask. His forehead touched mine. The office, the bakery, the city, the dead, the debts, all of it seemed to lean in and wait. Stay, he whispered, not as command, not as bargain, not as protection bought with fear. Stay. I thought of the alley, the stranger, the soft half. I thought of my father hiding truth in bread because he believed hunger made people pay attention. I thought of Lucia, of Livia, of Nico asleep one floor up with his second chance, still bruising under his skin. I thought of Dante Salvator, who had spent years mistaking survival for hardness and had still, somehow, left room in himself for ruin. Then I answered him with the only thing that had ever mattered between us. I stayed. And when he kissed me in the quiet office above the bakery, with the loaf broken open between us and the city carrying on below, it did not feel like the end of a debt. It felt like the beginning of a promise, a dangerous one, a living one, the kind built not from innocence, but from choosing at last not to let hunger be the only thing that remembered us.